UMBC.
State Circle is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Connecting Marylanders to their government. This is State Circle.
Good evening. Welcome to State Circle. Coming up tonight, how state universities plan to reopen, and we will get the Lieutenant Governor's thoughts on the president's handling of the police violence crisis. But first tonight, improving coronavirus data leading Governor Hogan to move to phase 2 of his recovery plan.
If we continue to see these really encouraging trends that we are currently experiencing, our next step, likely coinciding with the end of the school year, will be to consider opening some additional outdoor amusement, fitness, sporting, and other summertime activities.
Some harder hit counties will be moving more slowly. Official information and the latest data can be found at coronavirus.maryland.gov. With the governor's announcement, more businesses will begin opening as of tonight. Our Nancy Yamada reports many business owners have a lot on the line.
I worry about the small businesses. I worry about the people that got to work for the small businesses. It's a heck of a seesaw.
Despite those concerns, Governor Hogan says Maryland is ready to enter stage 2 of the roadmap to recovery. That means non-essential businesses can begin reopening. That includes all retail stores, nail salons, financial institutions, car dealerships, construction and manufacturing facilities. Montgomery and Prince George's counties, the two hardest hit counties, are delaying the second phase of reopening.
I think that what you have to do is carefully monitor what happens with the COVID cases as you take these steps and be prepared to step back from them if cases spike.
Businesses that are reopening must follow public health protocols based on the CDC and the state health department. And extra safety precautions aren't just for employees and customers. Experts say business owners need to be concerned about the potential for an increase in COVID-related liability.
In Maryland, a business owner owes a legal obligation to its customers to make its business property reasonably safe and to warn its customers of any known dangers.
David Appelfeld is a commercial litigation attorney with Shapiro Share.
What's important for businesses to focus on is identifying the risks, developing a plan or policy to mitigate those risks, and to the extent they can, providing or getting insurance that will cover them in an event a claim is filed.
As for safety protocols, it will differ by industry, but Appelfeld suggests it should include
developing policies or protocols for cleaning, following those policies, developing a safe distancing plan or policy, maintaining social behavior and those types of protections for both your employees and your customers, and also developing some sort of plan or policy for employee screening and self-reporting.
I'm Nancy Yamada for State Circle.
3 days after the primary election, many votes remain uncounted. In the closely contested Baltimore mayor's race, former Mayor Sheila Dixon leads the Democratic primary, but that's with as many as a third of ballots not counted as of our taping time. The delays stemmed from a Baltimore City Council race where the early return showed the incumbent council member losing to a little-known challenger by 96%. In a statement, the State Board of Elections said there was a printing error and promised correct results, saying the post-election ballot tabulation audit conducted after every election will be carefully reviewed to confirm the accuracy of the election results. We're joined now by Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford. Governor, thank you for being with us. For a notoriously mild-mannered individual, you've had some fairly strong words about the management of the elections department. Why is that?
Well, I do think it's time, and there's been a history of, I guess, challenges with the Board of Elections, State Board of Elections. Back on April 1st of this year, now 2 months ago, at the Board of Public Works, I asked questions of the Board of Elections whether they were prepared for then coming up the special election in the 7th Congressional District. They assured me that they were fine, that everything was going to go well, that the ballots were being set out. And I told them at that time, I said, as a person who hasn't done a whole lot of campaigning as a candidate myself, but have been around the block a couple of times. And I know when you do any type of large mail-in, you're going to get a lot of mail that's going to return because of bad addresses. And just knowing how people work and how people vote in this state and other places is that people move and they don't always update their voter registration information. They just go back to their old neighborhood to vote. And so I asked specifically, how are you going to handle that situation? And they said, oh, well, we're doing this, that, and the other. We have an outreach program that we've hired this PR firm to do. We're going to be working with the Department of Motor Vehicles to get the address changes. Now, keep in mind that Motor Vehicles was closed at that time. So, then you move forward to the special election, and they had problems. And the board meeting on May 6th, I asked, what were your lessons learned? They said, oh, well, there was some mail issues, but everything is, we're working through it. I asked about those undeliverable mail, bad addresses. They said, well, we don't have that information at this point. A week after that, the media reported 20,000 ballots in Baltimore City alone had been returned as undeliverable, basically bad addresses. As well as additional ballots that weren't delivered until either the day of the election or after the election. And so I, went through the last 5-6 years that I've been in office, that every election during that period, every 2 years, there have been problems, major problems, that really the oversight was with the State Board of Elections. And they didn't have anything to say about that. And so then, as it turned out with this election, again, they weren't prepared. A lot of people didn't get their ballots. The long lines were largely due to people who did not get their ballots or received the wrong ballots or were confused. And now we see that there are some additional challenges with regard to printing or errors of some sort, that it's time.
Governor,
And
I was going to say,
there's been a long list of problems too. Audits, even before our time, of problems. Remember the deballed voting machines and the problems associated with that? There was some 600,000 personally identifiable information that the Board of Elections had let out. So it's been a long challenge. And, the arrogance of the administrator, because she knows that it's very difficult for her to be fired. So
well, and that's how the legislature set it up that way. That it's almost as if you have a 5-member board and you need 6 votes. It's not quite that, but it'd be very difficult. My question is, would it be wise to change leadership 5 months before a general election that may also have to be done under difficult circumstances?
Oh, I think you have no choice, because I think at least if she were to step down, and I agree, it's been set up so that virtually, unless the Senate agrees when they're in session, she cannot be let go. And you shouldn't have a situation where there's no real oversight, where she's not accountable to anyone. I think it was the Gazette that several years ago wrote that, they've made this legislation so restrictive that you could have all 5 members vote to remove her. And then she could be convicted of murder and sentenced to death and also taken away her voting rights, and she still would serve. But I'm saying that if she were to step down, it's enough time to bring in someone to take a fresh look and to get the system ready to go forward with the general election. They still have to send out the same amount of ballots if it's going to be mail. Hopefully people will be able to go into the precincts, but you're still going to be covering the same statewide election that they were supposed to do this past week. So I think if you bring in new blood, someone to take a close look to identify what went wrong this time, they have enough time to get it straight for the November election.
Let me ask you about the George Floyd case and the protests. There are not that many African American Republican statewide elected officials out there in America, so you may have a unique perspective on it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's no question that he was murdered. I mean, it was unconscionable. It's very difficult to even watch the video, even to watch clips of it. And I think any, police officer would tell you that that was not following any kind of policy or any training that they have seen. And so I did say at the Board of Public Works that I think that the state is the country is at a turning point. I do agree with a lot of those who are demonstrating, who are saying that it is time to really have some serious conversations and open conversations about race in this country. I had mentioned that while I have friends and family members in law enforcement, I have faced disparate treatment at the hands of law enforcement, particularly when I was much younger, living in DC. But it wasn't the DC cops; it was Prince George's County that was the problem. Prince George's County Police at the time, and I'm talking about going back into the 70s and maybe even the early 80s, had a reputation of being flat out racist and very brutal when it came to dealing with the African American population. So I think that it is, we're at a point where we have to really take a serious look at policing and some of the underlying bias that are in our society. We saw this woman in New York City who was very quick because a gentleman said that she should put her dog on a leash, and she got so upset she called the police and claimed that he was trying to attack her. So it's that underlying bias that's in some folks that we need to talk about and address.
You may have the opportunity to be the state's first Black governor at some point. If you were in that position, or even
don't let my wife hear that.
What's that?
Don't let my wife hear that.
Well, yes, you need to get all the constituencies on board first. But if that were to happen, is there anything you could do from that position or your current position to really move the needle on this?
Well, I think, and let's talk about where I am right now. I think just the ability to talk about it and to be open. And when people want to pull together groups to, investigate these areas, to make sure that we're hearing from as many voices as possible, and not just hearing from a particular segment that may have an agenda, and to try to take as much of the politics out of it, the agendas out of it, and really have the honest discussion about the challenges and how we move forward. And some of those discussions are not going to be comfortable. They're not going to be easy for anyone to talk about. And so I think I can, talk about those things. I can be willing to listen, which I have been, and engage with people to see where we can go from here. And particularly as it relates to policing.
Speaking of politics, how would you rate the president's response to this situation?
Is there a scale? Very low. I don't think he's done a very good job. He steps on his message, and he does that all the time. I say virtually all the time. The day of the space launch, he made some comments with regard to George Floyd's killing, and it was good. There were good comments. But then he turns around a day or so later and goes to this 1960s law and order type of rhetoric. And so it takes away from anything that he may have said before. And it makes people suspicious whether that was truly how he felt, or was he just, reading talking points. And so I would have to grade it poorly.
Our newsmaker this week is the new chancellor of the University System of Maryland, Jay Perman. Dr. Perman, thanks for being with us.
Always good to be with you, Jeff.
University System, of course, is all of the state's public colleges and universities, with the exception of Morgan and St. Mary's. So you have a lot of campuses all over the state. They were impacted by the coronavirus in the spring semester. What's the plan going forward?
Well, we're very hopeful of bringing our students, our faculty and staff to the degree possible back to campus in the fall. That means we're going to do, we hope, some in-person teaching, and we're going to continue with some distance learning. It's going to be a hybrid.
Have you seen any enrollment changes? You hear about particularly undergrads thinking about taking a year off, a gap year. On the flip side, do you maybe have anybody coming in from a more expensive private college thinking if this is all going to be online anyway, you know, I'm not going to be seeing the Ivy, so what's the difference?
Well, our numbers are early, and I don't have details to answer some of the questions that you raised. But I would say overall, our numbers across the institutions are strong. We are anticipating good enrollment in the fall. I don't know exactly what the demographics are going to be. I do suspect that some students that are attending away from the state, or students that are thinking about attending away from the state, are going to want to be closer to home.
There are so many areas in media and digital businesses that it's said that they existing trends have suddenly jumped ahead 5 years in just a couple of months. Is it the same in higher education in terms of the future of your business, more distance learning, that sort of thing?
Well, I don't think there's any question that the need to pivot quickly this past March to entirely distance learning has advanced where we were with regard to distance learning and online learning. At the same time, we value all the assets that we have on campus. And that's why we are thinking toward making the most of this and creating the best hybrid situation we can for the future.
I have a rooting interest in some of your sports teams, and I sure hope they play if it's safe to do so. What do you expect?
Well, you said the key word. Everything that I've commented to you about is rooted in absolutely ensuring safety to the degree possible. So everything is contingent on doing things in a way that assures the greatest possible safety for our students, including our student athletes and everybody that works on our campus. We're just going to have to see.
You're actually a medical doctor, and does that background inform your thinking about this, your thoughts on this disease? Do you know anybody who's had it?
Well, I would start by acknowledging to your last question that I've had a family member suffer from COVID-19, fortunately fully recovered. As you know, Jeff, I'm a pediatrician. Pediatricians are so rooted in preventing disease. So I, together with everybody else, am looking forward with great hope to a vaccine. Having said that, the advent of a vaccine is not going to eradicate this disease, at least in the near term. So much of our thinking and our approach as it relates to higher education needs to be a focus on learning to live with this disease. I hope that people vaccinate themselves when it's available, but it's going to take some time.
And the disease outcomes seem to be a lot different for the people that a pediatrician sees or the college president sees on campus than for older folks. Does that make a difference in terms of how you calibrate the acceptable level of risk?
Well, we can't be cavalier about this. I am, of course, very happy, as is everybody that cares about children and young adults, that the disease seems not to victimize them, with certain significant exceptions, to the degree it would victimize somebody that's older like me, people with chronic conditions. But we need to remember that we live as a community in higher education, and we have faculty and staff who are at risk, and we're going to need to be very mindful of them. So we're not going to be cavalier about anybody.
Let me switch subjects for a second. If you had students on campus at the moment, they would be protesting the death of George Floyd and racial inequality and police brutality. How do the institutions respond to this situation?
Well, we're looking forward to the opportunity when the family gets back together to dialogue. But I hope the dialogue is going to be more than identifying what's wrong. We have to take action. For myself, my focus has always been on education of our children so that they can have opportunity, they have the talent, they need the opportunity in order to make a better life for themselves. I hope I can energize some of my students in that kind of activity. But this is a complex problem. We need to take actions.
A number of your institutions have significant police departments. Is there anything that you need to do to redouble efforts to make sure that they're properly up to date and well managed?
I was just talking about this with our presidents the other day. We need to recheck. We need to resurvey. I know I have done this over the years when I was president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore. I think we have the reassurance that our police departments know how to police, but we're going to check.
Dr. Perman, delightful to speak to you. We do appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you.
Now a look at the many frontline workers doing their jobs at the risk of possibly catching a sometimes fatal disease. Here's MPT's Charles Robinson.
During the course of this situation, I was exposed, right? The moment I found out that I was exposed, I wasn't contacted, but I was able to find out that this colleague was positive.
Meet Ololu Wadamilo Oleon. He has worked 9 years as a correctional officer at Jessup. Sometime in March, he was exposed to COVID-19. He went into isolation, separating himself from his wife and 2 children. This was the early days of the coronavirus. The day he'll never forget, the test results following quarantine.
The day I was called after my test and I was told I was negative, I jumped out of the room and I went to the living room and I told my children, I'm negative. So they were just dancing and happy.
Patrick Moran represents Oleon as a member of ASME.
A lot of the essential services that are being done by the state right now are being done by our members, the AFSCME members across the state of Maryland.
So you're likely to find ASME workers here at the state office complex here in Baltimore, but they don't come in contact with the public too much. But those who do have to worry about their own health as well as the health of their loved ones.
Why aren't they able to provide the basics for a healthy and safe workplace for the clients and their own employees?
What the union wants is more testing of frontline workers, provide personal protective gear, and they're looking for written plans. Reacting to their request, the governor rolled out universal testing for all Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services and the Department of Juvenile Services staff, which will include their inmate population. The governor also said he would begin 20,000 tests per week to nursing homes. In Baltimore, I'm Charles Robinson for State Circle.
A point of pride for many Marylanders during the worst of the coronavirus outbreak was the community response. With the state partially reopened, our Sue Copen has an update.
Rhonda is an Annapolis resident and a first-time visitor to this free community market that's been in operation now for over 2 months. What did she find?
Oatmeal, canned soup, canned tuna fish, whole tomatoes, cucumbers.
Rhonda works in the hospitality industry. She's been out of work since March 10th. The free market, she says, is a big help.
Absolutely wonderful.
This free community farmers market was started soon after the governor ordered the shutdown to battle the COVID-19 pandemic. It's been sponsored by Annapolis restaurant Latitude 38 with help and contributions from businesses throughout the area. The coordinator, Latitude 38 bar manager, Justin Schaffner.
They're coming from Baltimore, the Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, all over to definitely take part and get some meals and get some produce.
Schaffner says they've served some 4,000 prepared meals and handed out more than 14,000 bags of groceries. The biggest surprise, the wide array of people turning up who've been impacted by the pandemic.
You know, you see people of all walks of life and, you know, people that had a job that they were making six figures and for the first time in their life they don't have anything and they're in need.
With the expansion of resources came an expansion in outreach to medical personnel and first responders in the area.
Justin kind of made it a little extra special for us and for the first responders to say, listen, this is when we're going to do it. You guys come. We'll give you what you need up front.
John Mordell is the primary cook for his crew at the Eastport Fire Station. He says they've appreciated this community effort.
To have them come back and want to serve us has been pretty humbling.
But with the state entering phase 2 of the pandemic recovery, Justin Schaffner sent a letter out this week to donors and supporters saying this is their last week. Schaffner says he and the restaurant will always strive to be involved in helping the community and will look to doing pop-up markets because the need will still be there for a long time. In Annapolis, Sue Copen for State Circle.
And that is State Circle for this week. For all of us at MPT, thanks for watching and have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.
Programs on MPT are made possible by our members and the following.
Low vision specialists of Maryland and Virginia, helping to create a personalized solution for individuals who are legally blind, suffer from macular degeneration, or struggle with other vision loss conditions. Learn more at 1-855-928-EYES.
Discover an active, vibrant, connected community full of inquisitive individuals who've been learning all their life and have no plans on stopping now. Roland Park Place, metropolitan senior living in the heart of northern Baltimore City, featuring the grand expansion opening summer 2021.